Manever I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, I see them yopo.
Hello and welcome to PENDREAM TV, your number one hub for political truth, fact, and fearless analysis. Today we dive deep into President Mahama's declaration of no third term bid and the explosive reaction from Al-Hassan Suhuyini and Paul Adom Ochri. Stay tuned because this debate is heating up and you don't want to mix out the second of it.
Terms of the law in order for him to be able to seek a third term. And remember that this matter came up at the time when Justice Tokono was facing, impeachment. Now, the president has finally broken his silence on this matter, and most of the newspapers yesterday carried it. Even today, the Informer newspaper has carried same. And I want us to look at this story and then have a conversation around it. Now, the Informer has a news desk report, and it says that President John Dramani Mahama has dispelled rumors of a suspicion that he would tamper with the 1992 Republican Constitution of Ghana to pave the way for him to run for a third term as president in 2028. According to him, his focus is to tackle and enforce fiscal discipline so as to nip in the bud the overspending that comes with election years and consequently fuel cyclical economic crisis. The president gave the assurance when he spoke at the bilateral meeting with Singaporean President Tharman Shanmugaratnam during his 3-day state visit to Singapore. And I quote him, I'm going to quote him, "I will not be a candidate in the next elections, and therefore I can hold the line when it comes to fiscal discipline." Now, President Mahama's declaration comes in the wake of a caution given by managing editor of the Inside newspaper, Kwesi Pratt Jr. for him, Mahama, not to bow to pressure from within and without government to amend the constitution, paving way for him to go for a third term as president. Mr. Pratt's warning comes in the wake of insensate calls by a section of the Ghanaian public, including prominent political figures and religious leaders, claiming ambiguity in Article 66(2) of the constitution, which stipulates the presidential term limits. According to the veteran journalist and human rights activist, those who want to destroy President John Dramani Mahama are not just those who are waging a campaign against his person, policies, and actions. They include those who are asking him to play God. Now, these are the people who insist that without him, Ghana will collapse. And to prevent that from happening, the 1992 Constitution should be amended to enable him to run for a third term. The point they make is that President John Dramani Mahama is the only one amongst the 32 million people of Ghana who has leadership qualities. This is most certainly an insult to the people of Ghana, and the President Mahama, I know, will not encourage it. The mark of a good leader is the ability to mentor people to follow in his or her path. And the challenge for President Mahama is to his duties after he leaves office on January 7, 2029. Now, history teaches us all that leaders who attempt to defy their rule or to deify their rule eventually get cast into the dustbin of rotten governance. The doctrine of the divine rule of kings has no place in governance in 2025. These were contained in his write-up post on X, formerly Twitter. Now, in this wise, he advised President Mahama not to entertain such calls as to preserve his image and keep his reputation intact. Now, it says, following growing calls for an interpretation by the Supreme Court of the provisions of Article 66(2), Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh has said there is no ambiguity as far as the provisions in the Constitution are concerned, indicating that there is nothing to interpret. He notes that there is nowhere in the text which makes room for ambiguity and that the term limit is total and not conditional. He stated that no judge can alter the meaning of the article to permit President Mahama to seek a third term. There's nothing to interpret about the presidential term limit provision in the 1992 Constitution, none whatsoever. This kind of thinking or talk is only possible in a legal culture that has raised or taught generations of lawyers and judges to believe that not even a clear constitutional text, one that is not in tension with the structure or history or purpose or spirit of that text or any other part of the Constitution can constrain a judge. This is where the Ghana-style so-called modern purposive approach to constitutional interpretation appears to have led us. Any interpretation of Article 66(1) to the effect that a president who has been elected to a second term can stand election again, i.e. a third term, upon the expiration of the second term is illegitimate and bogus. Oh, what do you make of this?
Well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I like the reaction that has come from different people in different groups. Some have even criticized President Mahama for stating it because they said it is obvious. But it has an effect on both the MPP and the NDC in very different ways. Whether the president should have done it or not, I think the answer is yes, he should. What he did was correct. Because we've all heard the rumors, as you said, and this is something that has been said by many presidents in the past to give assurances to the people, because we still have a very fragile democracy. And Article 66(2) says a person shall not be elected to hold office as president for more than 2 terms. That's all it said. It's one of the shortest articles in there. We know that there's 2 consecutive terms. There may be terms that are not consecutive. What really did the Constitution mean? So a president who has been elected with such a big majority as President Mahama can begin a process of national engagement about this. It may waste the people's time. He may not succeed, but he will be able to achieve it. And that can even slow down the nation. So if he comes and says, I'm not doing it, I think it is. Akufo-Addo said the same thing, didn't he? Akufo-Addo had done 2 consecutive terms, but he found occasion to say that I'm not running for a 3rd term. It's always important to calm people down. Now, what does it do to the NDC? There are good and there are not so good parts. Now, to the NDC, what it does is that President Mahama may have, by making this statement boldly and confidently, whilst it helps the nation, he may have, in de facto terms, kick-started the contest within the NDC for his succession. Because you will notice that if you are an NDC person or a big NDC minister, and President Mahama comes in the 2nd term, wins such a big margin, very popular at the time, you would want to gauge how the next 1 year, 2 years is going to go before you stick out your neck, unless you are very bold, or unless you have done it, you have already told your story before. Now, if the president decides that he wants to engage the general public about the meaning of Article 66, either by a constitutional amendment process, one of which we have is underway, or by a Supreme Court interpretation, as minister and as a loyalist of the president, you have to abide by that and wait for that process to finish before you can now stick out your neck and say, I'm running or I'm not running. So if I want to look at individuals, for instance, if you take a person like the Honorable Minister for Education, the Honorable Haruna Idrisu, President Mahama's statement has taken off the limit that the Dagbani culture and Islam may have placed on him in this conversation. What is the limit that the Dagbani culture places on him? He said Dagbani. Dagbanis recognize elderhood.
You mean Dagomba?
Dagomba.
Yeah,
Yes,
Dagomba is the language.
Sorry. Dagomba culture.
Dagomba culture, yeah.
Dagombas recognize elderhood. And to all intents and purposes, Idrisu Haruna will see President Mahama as his elder. Now, you don't go and start a contest when you don't know when your elder in that situation wants to do.
Yeah.
So somebody like Haruna Idrisu's ambition, if there is any, would have been kept until this announcement. Now President Mahama says, I am not doing it. So he's able to begin the thinking. And many NDC leaders would have to resist that temptation to receive this information as a de facto signal of the beginning of the contest. If you are Julius Debra and you're chief of staff of the president, you would have to definitely hold your horses until you are clear in your mind what the president wants to do with this matter. Maybe the president wants to settle this matter once and for all. What did the Constitution mean? What do the people of Ghana want? If the president decides there's going to be a process, you have to wait until that process is over. But now, the president has said that I'm not running. So almost de facto terms, people can start running, which may not be very good for the country, but can politicians resist that temptation? I don't know. If you come to the lead candidate, the party chairman, Johnson Asiedu Nketia, even though people talk about it and we all know, he's not really come out clearly to say anything. But now, the boss says that he's not running. And so all of these opportunities open up. So we have to look and gauge in the media space and within the political circles what that happens, what that does to the NDC. But in terms of President Mahama's announcement, it's perfect and it's positive. Even President Donald Trump, we had heard when he became president that he and some of his supporters were contemplating this. And in America, it may be easier than it is in Ghana because they have had, until the 22nd Amendment, they had presidents who can run more than 2 terms, 2 consecutive terms. Franklin Roosevelt, I believe, was the last person to have done that. And then in 1951, they brought the amendment. So an American president can say that, okay, let's go back to pre-22nd Amendment. So that may be easier. Ghana is more difficult because we don't have that situation. But because our democracy is young, it is important that the leaders make these statements so that they solidify the democracy and then we move on. Some may even think President Mahama should have taken the opportunity for us to settle this. That's another view. For the MPP, there were those who felt that if President Mahama decides to begin any process towards another term, it was positive for the MPP because some of them were sure that if this happens, this is an own goal the NDC is scoring. Ghanaians were going to resist it, and Ghanaians thereby were going to resist NDC, and the 2028 elections will happen as planned, and the MPP was going to take advantage of that. So there were people in the MPP who thought that, let's keep quiet and let's see whether he does it, because if he does, it's actually good for us. Now, that own goal will no longer be scored. And so the NPP must now look fairly and squarely at other ways in which they can win the 2028 election, because if this was one of the ways that they were contemplating, surely, certainly, now it's gone. So that is the effect that this announcement is going to have on the nation, on the constitutional democracy, positive. On the NDC, potentially, it is a de facto signal that, hey, guys, you can begin the process, which is not good for the government because it's a new government, less than a year old. You don't want the process to begin. And this is part of the difficulties that was expressed ahead of the 2004 election, because this cycle of changing the president, if you look at the constitutional arrangement, is designed to occur every other election. It's not designed to occur this election and the next election, because this nation always suffers. The economy always suffers from it. So in 2024's election, you are changing the president because he's finished his 2 terms. It is anticipated that the president who comes would also be able to run 2 terms. And so you have a longer period and then you don't have a fragile government so early. But here is a case where 2024 we have changed the president, and then the next election we are changing the president again. So, and we are very early in it. And this always happens in a second term. Once you turn a second term and the oath is taken by the president for the last time, quickly the whistle is blown and people start. So we would have preferred that to happen for the sake of the economy and for the sake of the nation and running it. Every other election, not back-to-back elections, but well, that's what we are saddled with. That is what the dictates of our constitution says. That's what the people of Ghana actually voted for. So we have to deal with it, but we have to be hopeful and hope that we can count on the magnanimity of the leaders in the NDC, that whereas they are entitled to go for this, they may have to slow it down a bit in favor of the work that has been given to them by the president and by the government to run. Because if soon we see ministers at each other's throats over the succession, the country suffers. I mean, politicians on the opposite side may be excited about it, but it's always never really good for the country. We want unionism. If President Mahama was definitely running, you won't have people thinking Ato Forsen getting suspicious of this. The party chairman is in the race. Chief of staff seems to be in the race. It's, let's hope that we can build on the magnanimity of Honorable Suhuyini and his friends, that they would hold their horses and perhaps draw this in maybe January 2027 or something like that. It might not be helped by the NPP's early Congress, because as soon as the NPP elects his leader, he will get on the campaign trail and start it. There will be, so we just the effects of President Mahama's announcement, and we just have to rely on the magnanimity of the NDC leadership so that we can coast through until we are ready for a battle.
No, it's an interesting point you raised, Paul, because I recall, I think it must have been this week, I heard the national chairman of the party, that's Asidun Ketia, talk about the same issue where he says those who are peaking ahead of time, relax, because if the NDC doesn't succeed, it doesn't matter who the NDC puts up in 2028, they'll struggle. So it looks like there are issues, and it appears that people have already started lobbying and doing all kinds of things. So it sort of addresses the point that you made. But I want us to stay a bit on, Alassane, I'll come to you, a bit on what this announcement means for NDC MPP politics. You talked about how some persons within the MPP, for instance, are thinking that, look, if Mahama wants to go again, that'll be scoring an own goal. So then, that's an advantage to them. But there are also some who are saying that, look, if Mahama does not go, so within the same MPP, what this means for whoever wins, and of course, those who are saying this are more like proponents of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, adherents of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, saying that if Mahmoud Bawumia goes in the 2028 elections, now it is not a Mahama. So essentially, the grounds would have been softer, or things would have been much easier for them in 2028. What do you make of that as well?
Well, it's difficult to tell what will happen in 2028 because in this country we have had political parties believe that a certain opponent in the other party is weaker and that opponent has defeated them.
Yeah.
It happened in 2000. In 1998, the NDC were happy that Adodankwa Akufo-Addo was defeated in Suhuyini and that Kufuor was a candidate that they could manage better. Kufuor defeated them. Some people hold the theory, yesterday we were having a conversation, and some held the theory that proposition is true because if Akufo-Addo had been the candidate in 2000, the MPP would have won a first straight round victory because he was popular. Others think that no, the issues that may have plagued him in 2008 would have come up in 2000 as well, etc., etc. Since the defeat of John Mahama in 2016, proponents of the MPP had always held for the 2020 election and for the 2024 election that Mahama is a cool chop. You've had Mustafa Hamid and others talk about, oh, they want to bring Mahama, oh, that's easy for us. And you have heard arguments about NDC should change their candidates, Mahama is a spent force and all of that. So there was some thinking that John Mahama was always an easier run for the NPP in any election. We saw what happened. In 2020, we saw what happened. And in 2024, we saw what happened. So, yes, some people may think that, oh, if Mahama is not there, we have an easier deal. Yeah. And you may get a candidate who can come up and deal with it. There's the conversation about second-time candidates' work, candidates' work. I think that is basically correct in political marketing. When you have a candidate that has been repeated, basically it makes sense that people would like him. But I think the youth of Ghana are demanding more than that, you know, and we saw that in the 2024 elections, where some of the data and some of the statistics that came out cannot be seen in any of the past elections that had been run. It should suggest to us, if we trust the results of 2024, that something dramatic is going on within the Ghanaian voting population, within the Ghanaian social stratification of politics. Otherwise, how did we come to an election in 2028 where as many as 2 million people all across the north, in Accra, everywhere, in NDC areas, in MPP areas, together 2 million people did not turn up to cast their ballot. And that was not because they were disinterested. Perhaps we have to have a research to look at that. Right. Was it as a result of disinterest? Because there are two ways in which people boycott a vote. They are either boycotting to make a statement or they are not interested. So I don't think that the 2 million people who didn't vote as a result of disinterest in the matter. I think they were making a statement. For some people, they were making a statement against their own party. For some people, they were making a statement against politics in general. Right. So it should tell us that there is a major turning point. And that happened, this turning point about the youth happened in France before our election. Perhaps we were not watching. When the Macron government was rudely shocked into a first round election that the far right almost won. And everybody in France had to rise up for the second round to make sure that the far right doesn't win. But they never thought that anybody in 2024 will be thinking about bringing in a far right government into a Central European country like France. But the young people were demanding something, and the campaign promises of the far right sounded very sexy to them, and so they went out there, they voted. So we shouldn't think that there are some principles that will follow. So for Dr. Bawumia and his team, I believe that they are not particularly excited that once we are elected, we have a second term and therefore we have very little to do and we'll just pick it up. Okay. No one is just going to pick up 2028 election. Hard questions are going to be asked by the youth. Many, many questions. So I can see the point. Historically is being correct. Repeating candidates is basically correct for political marketing. But the kind of young people and the demands they are making and the influence of social media and the connection with other countries is radically changing the minds of the people. And I said before that if 2028 does not deliver, Ghana may be heading towards an independent candidate winning elections one day. That's interesting. Because the people, it happened in Benin. And if you go to Benin today, they have not regretted voting for an independent candidate. Look at what is happening in Benin. So the political class must, I think, abandon the historical sort of indications and deal with what is before them. Okay. Take your victim as you have it. They should deal with what is before them. Right. This is the youth of Ghana. This is what they are demanding. Whether we are number second on the ballot, whether we've come before, whether we've come, it doesn't really matter.
We'll delve a bit more deeper into this analysis, especially when we get to the topic on people filing their nominations and so forth, the people who are filing with their messagings and so on and so forth. I think that this analysis would really be extremely important at the time. But Alassane, What do you also make of what the president has said? There's someone who actually even feel that he shouldn't have been spoken about this at all. I don't know where you stand.
Yeah, I stand with the latter.
Okay.
Because I don't believe there was a rumor. What I saw was an agenda that was being set by some people and hoping that either way it will elicit the kind of reaction that the president has given them. There were those in the NPP who I think should be apologizing to His Excellency President Mahama now and the NDC, but they won't. They set the agenda and went to the extent of even holding press conferences to suggest it as if they were speaking facts, and even enacted scenarios such as the legal tussle that the Chief Justice is engaged in as basis of their, suggestion that His Excellency President Mahama intended to run for a third term. I think such people in a decent democracy should be apologizing to all of us for taking us for granted and for spewing such ridiculous, reasons just to justify their defense of the Chief Justice, who is purely being taken through the constitutional provisions. But like I said, they will not apologize. That is part of that agenda that has led to President Mahama's response. And Moro, there was no silence, because really, when I read the papers and they say he has broken his silence, it's not as if it was a matter that, required his response or his statement. It's cast in stone. It's basic. It's self-explanatory. But you know why perhaps the people who set this agenda did what they did? These are people, Muru, who have gone to the extent of convincing all of us and actually interpreting it at the Supreme Court that a Ghanaian birth certificate is not proof of nationality. A Ghanaian birth certificate, like with all the details of your parents being Ghanaian, is still not proof of nationality. And so sometimes I think that some of this agenda setting is based on what people could have done or would have done if they had similar opportunities. So they saw that President Mahama's popularity level was that high. And perhaps they started imagining themselves in that shoes and began to, imagine how they have convinced all of us that even if you have a birth certificate with your mother and father being Ghanaian, it's not proof of birth of nationality. And then perhaps they started toying with that idea that, well, if we were in this shoe, we could, take advantage of this popularity and once again misinterpret and mislead everybody to accept that, a birth certificate with parents being Ghanaian is not proof of national identity. So even when it is so absolute, as it has been stated in 66.2, and I hope I can quickly open to that and just share with you. I mean, that article is the cornerstone of democratic change, Moro. It's put in almost every democratic constitution because democracy is to permit change. So where it does not allow the concentration of power. So where one man is so popular, it will still result in the person being changed because the cornerstone of democracy is change. And so when you look at 66.2, I can't imagine where and how that is ambiguous. Moro, it states simply that a person shall not be elected to hold office as president of Ghana for more than 2 terms. Full stop. Shall not be elected to hold office as president of Ghana for more than 2 terms. Where is the ambiguity? Where is the need for a president to break silence on this? And mind you, we are not talking about a President Rawlings who transitioned from a military rule to a democratic rule, and perhaps there would have been fears entertained at the time that he may not want to quit. We are talking about a President Mahama, and we are not talking about, 4 years of our democracy, 8 years of our democracy. We are talking about 20 years plus of our democracy. A President Mahama who has been in public life since we started this democratic experiment. And it's been very difficult to fault him democratically in terms of his democratic principles. He served as an assemblyman, he served as a member of parliament, served as vice president, and now as president. And throughout this period of service, there's no one time that he was ever held responsible for going against blatantly the Constitution, blatantly against the Constitution. He's a man who respects the rule of law by deed and by words. It's not like what we have heard in the past. This is a man who throughout his period, you can't say that he has engaged in anything subtly or openly that, confronts the belief that he's a man who respects the rule of law. Clearly. So there was no need for him to break silence on this matter. Like I said, Article 66(2) is the cornerstone of every democracy. And it's not just in Ghana. It's the cornerstone of every democracy. It allows for change. So even if a party is popular or a man is popular, his party will still have to change him. That is what Article 66(2) seeks to do. And that is what democracy should be about. So that power is not concentrated in the hands of one person for a very long time. And the article emphasizes on term limits and not serving. And we have determined in Ghana that a term is 4 years. So in any democracy, if the term is more than 7 years, that one person can serve for that length of period. So it does not, this article is not just in the Ghanaian constitution, it's in many other constitutions. In fact, I think all democratic constitutions have this article. But the emphasis is always on term limits and not serving. So where a democracy chooses to run 7 years a term, you can have one person rule for 17 years. But our democracy has come of age. And any president that thinks that he can toy with this particular article will have the Ghanaian people to confront with. Because no matter how much, one is celebrated, we always believe that we have all come to accept that there's good in change. There's improvement in change. Yes, sometimes we experience deterioration, but that is the beauty of democracy. When we experience that deterioration, then we appreciate what was better. And so I think that it was needless to begin with, but perhaps it was important to those who have the penchant of misinterpreting and misleading all of us, especially when it serves them right, when there's a benefit for them. Because, Moro, I still cannot fathom how you tell me that a birth certificate that says my mother is Ghanaian, my father is Ghanaian and I was born in Ghana does not prove that I am a national of Ghana.
Okay.
But the Supreme Court upheld this and interpreted this to be the case. And so when such people begin to talk about Article 66(2) and talk of ambiguity, my suspicion is that if they had the opportunity that President Mahama currently, is enjoying, they probably would have thought of tinkering with it. And they project their ill motives on him. But he is a disciplined man.
Right.
He is not somebody who will, take undue advantage of the goodwill that the people of Ghana have showed him all these years.
Okay.
Now, let me introduce an angle that I find interesting when I read Article 66(2).
Okay.
And I'm not a lawyer. I haven't been to law school before. My brother is. But at least, I think that the conversation will be much more edifying and elevating if we are discussing whether a former president can contest to go to parliament and become a legislator. That, for me, will be intellectually stimulating. Whether a former president can even run as vice president, can be selected as vice president. That, for me, will be intellectually stimulating. Because Article 66(2) does not say anything about that. So you may not be able to run as president to be elected for more than 2 terms, but can you partner somebody and be a vice president to the person after your after serving your legal 2 terms? It is, for me, that would be an interesting conversation to have.
Okay.
Whether you can decide, Nana Akufo-Addo was a very good legislator,
Yes.
that you want to spend your idle time as former president in parliament to contribute to lawmaking.
Okay.
Especially with your rich experience having served as president.
No, it's an interesting.
That would be an
no,
intellectually
it's
stimulating conversation to
It's
have.
an interesting conversation, and I'm sure that one of these days, when the two of you hopefully get to meet again, we can look at that. But there are 2 strands of this matter. One has to do with whether or not the president should have spoken to this issue or not, and I think that you have make your case as to why you thought that the president should have remained silent, which is fine.
And you see why again?
Now,
I think that he shouldn't have, because a new agenda has been set by Paul on this program,
Which is
the NDC race.
well, but you don't think
And how this statement has opened,
because you see, because you see, even Alassane, even within the NDC,
yes,
and I'm sure perhaps you know better. At least if you're someone whose ears on the ground, we know the people who have either privately or quietly spoken to people about what you're considering and so on. Now, some of them were actually not even sure whether or not this 3rd-term agenda was real or was actually a myth. Some of them, I don't want to mention names. Don't you think that now that the president has said, forget about the rumors, I am not interested, it brings certainty in the minds of persons who want to succeed him? Okay? Question is that, doesn't this then sort of gives the green light for people to actually even now go all out and start basically campaigning, albeit quietly? Because you see, if you listen to Asidun Ketia in some recent interviews, in fact, he's done 3 interviews. I don't want to mention the name of the media platform. 3 interviews on separate platforms. And the theme of that interview is about hold your horses, allow the man to finish. Because if the NDC government succeeds, whoever the party delegates elect to lead John Dramani, to lead NDC, would then be able to win the 2028 elections. It tells you that there's something happening. So then I don't know whether you get where Paul is coming from.
I get it.
Yeah.
But you see, Moro, that is another reason why
Yes.
I think the president didn't.
And sorry, before you come in, there's another school of thought in the NDC. There are some people who feel that, look, in order to give the NDC a stronger footing in the party in the 2028 elections, they think that the president should seek a third term. And that they believe and they feel and think that all the other persons who have said they want to succeed him are not ready. And they'll be ready in 2032. Do you get the point I'm making? There are some people who have that opinion that, look, whatever John Mahama needs to do to seek a third term, he should. You know, now whether that call is a legitimate one, makes sense or not, I mean, that's another matter. But there are some people who think like that. So I just want that to sort of find expression or sort of to give some perspectives to what you
see, Moro, in politics, I've come to learn that the agenda of your opponents is an ending. They will always set one agenda. When you demolish the one before it, they will always set one agenda. So you are never going to please your opponents who are set on ensuring that you look bad. And if you engage in, responding to every agenda that they set, that is when you engage in what maybe the English will call a wild goose chase. Because you will never be able to stop them from talking. And like they say, in opposition, the only thing available to a political party in opposition is talk. Is to imagine things and just throw them out there to create conversation. But you have to be focused on your deliverables when you are in government. And so opinions are like noses. Even within the NDC, they don't change the law. You understand? If people held those views and held those opinions, there's no way those opinions and views were going to lead to the change of the law. And again, those views and opinions, I do not believe, had the power to change the character of the man we are talking about here. And that is President Mahama. I mean, his character should be well known to anybody who has followed our politics all this while. And I was set in my mind that no amount of pressure was going to make the man, want to tamper with the Constitution, because that is the only way one can run for a third term, if you tamper with the Constitution. But as the Constitution is currently crafted, there's no way you can justify a third term in it unless you tamper with it. And knowing the character of President Mahama, no amount of pressure was going to sway him to attempt to tamper with the Constitution. Okay. And so for me, it was a non-starter. It was needless for anybody to entertain fears that President Mahama may want to run for a third term. Okay. But yes, I understand that some people, fantasize with that. Some people romanticize with that. They thought that perhaps because of maybe their own personal influence and control, they would have still loved President Mahama to be around. But those were just views and opinions that anyone within the NDC or outside the NDC could have held. Okay. As for ambition, Moro, it's the fuel for any political life. Ambition is the fuel for any political life. And so people in the political space are allowed to have ambitions. And even if this constitution has stated that a president can run for 5 terms, people would have still been ambitious to succeed him after the 5th term. It wouldn't have stopped people from having ambition. And so for me, it is neither here nor there. We have a 4-year mandate, and I agree with the chairman of our party that the only way that 4-year mandate can be renewed will be based on the performance of this current 4-year mandate that we have. And so anybody who wants to succeed President Mahama will have to first of all put his shoulders to the wheel and ensure that this government is a success. Otherwise, whatever fantasy you have of being a president will not materialize, at least not in the next election, if you do not help for this government to succeed.
Okay.
And that is a point that has to be, ingrained in the minds of everybody in this government, especially with any fantasy of becoming a president.
Okay.
Otherwise, they should all forget it and go to sleep.
Okay. All right, Paul.
I think that I get Alasan Suhuyini's point, Honorable, about President Mahama and tinkering the constitution to run a third term, but that's not really where the danger is. The danger is not in the conclusion. The danger is in a process that begins that can really waste everybody's time. And the process can begin legitimately with a president who has a constitution review committee that is looking at the constitution, who is very popular and who thinks that let us at least test this with the Ghanaian public. If President Mahama were to say so, he hasn't done anything wrong, at least not yet. He has not said, I want a third term. He's invited the Ghanaian public, let's go to a referendum, let's test this provision. When a referendum is set out, you're going to have arguments for and against, like we saw in the potential referendum for the district assembly thing that Akufo-Addo brought, that we should vote them, we should elect them on partisan lines. That was, as soon as he said, let us test it, there was arguments for, arguments against. Many people who were making these arguments were aware of where the president's view of the matter was, except that with Akufo-Addo is very direct, so he has told the Ghanaians that this is what I want. But often, presidents doesn't need to say this is what I want. He only needs to kickstart the process and allow lectures to happen, debates going on, MPs will be divided, something that is a third term, something that there shouldn't be a third term. Everybody will be talking about it, and then you have a process starts in parliament through constitutional amendment. Let's go to a referendum. Not just that, may not be the only article in there to be amended the referendum. Referendum goes, you have 5 articles, and it's one of them. And then you are going to have all of these debates. Now, what President Mahama has done for us, which is good, is that I am not interested in even beginning the conversation. That's where I think Honorable must see that. It's not so much that he being thought of as an autocratic leader who wants to change the constitution, but he doing good for Ghana by telling not just Ghana, but the international community that I'm not going to begin a process of any conversation about any third term. I'm not interested in starting that. If you are starting that, you are not with me. And he has a constitutional review committee sitting, and the constitutional review committee is going to make proposals to him. So what he's telling us, in fact, is that any such proposals that even come from the review committee is going to reject it. That's really what President Mahama is saying, because the proposals will come to him. He would have to determine how the process goes forward. So that is the part that is good. And that's the part that the MPP were thinking, some of them were thinking will be an own goal. That if he starts that process, then because this is a process that is going nowhere. Many Ghanaian youth and voters today may not have been born in the late 1970s. But Achampon's, union government process created such a major problem and took the country back a few steps. So the older generation have reminded us of that. So there was going to be some level of resistance to any president who wants to do that. And that's why, even with Akufo-Addo, who has served 2 consecutive terms, he still found occasion, and I think he also spoke abroad, to allay the fears of everyone that I'm not running for any third term. So it is important that President Mahama says there will be political fallouts because it is politics. So once the president speaks, there will be pros and cons. So yes, it is true that there's a de facto whistle blown, and we hope that people can control themselves, but we don't know whether they will. Often politicians don't. And I like the statements he makes, which is very true, but it never really lives his truth in politics, which is that let us all focus and deliver a winning government, and that way everybody can come. Because running for president is a full-time job. And President Kufuor, who is a seasoned politician.
And that's it for today's breakdown on Mahama's no third term bid and the fiery reactions from Paul Adom Ochre and Alasan Suhuyini. What's your take on this? Do you think Mahama is finally closing the chapter on his presidential ambition, or there is more to it? Drop your thoughts at the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to PENDREAM TV for more fearless political updates. Until next time, stay tuned, stay informed, and keep watching PENDREAM TV. Thank you.
PENDREAM TV now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.